It's a very difficult question because when we talk about making restitution, the question, of course, is how do you make restitution? I don't believe necessarily that there should be any restitution given to any individual because I see nothing but problems and inconsistencies if that happens. I think it would be an acceptable idea to me. I can't speak for the whole race, and I know many people might disagree, but I think it would be acceptable for many of these institutions to come up with a program whereby they're going to try to really work to level the playing field, whether that be scholarships in universities, comprehensive training programs, foundations that receive charitable contributions for social justice and social action projects. I think that's the way that we need to uplift the whole race at one time. But as far as getting them to do it, many of them don't want to admit it, despite the fact that we know, because they've researched it, that a lot of these for-profit companies, for example, the insurance companies, a lot of them made their largest amount of money during the slavery period on insured cargo that was grown by slaves or put on ships by slaves, and in some cases the slaves themselves, because they were nothing more than property. So they have gotten rich and super rich on our backs. Some of the great universities of this country, I won't mention any names, but it's a fact that they were founded with money from the slave trade.
I don't think that anybody owes anybody anything right now.
Restitution is such an interesting term. I have read in many articles asking, do we still pay people back their 40 acres and the mules?
If it were distributed in a fair, equal way, it should be given. But when you hear a whole race talking about restitution and we should get our 40 acres and a mule, that's hilarious to me because it's something that I never see. I just don't see it.
I think that that addresses the monetary side of it, but I think that public apologies are always good to recognize the wrong that these companies have done, because restitution just kind of gives money out and just explains just as a way of apology. But I think that in order, conversation should be had instead of just restitution.
I don't think that people who owned slaves in the past or their ancestors owned slaves in the past owe black people much of anything, just because it's been long enough that we have made our mark in the world and we have had enough time to make our place in the world. And not just that, you know, just because someone's ancestors did something doesn't mean that, you know, it's their way of thinking, you know. Maybe their ancestors were the way they were because it was just passed down from generation to generation, and those were the times back then. I don't think that someone who owns a business now that had slaves in the past should owe anybody, ancestors of slaves, anything.
Even with us having a black president, I just don't see it happening. But I do believe those that were unfairly treated or that were used, if there were a way to chase the roots of their ancestors and restitution was something that could be given back to them, I think they deserve it.
You know, not to dismiss, not to diminish, or not to make little of anything that took place in our history or in our past. People that are at the helm of so many companies today, they were not a part of holding us down, belittling, or degrading us. I have, fortunately, due to civil rights and where we are today, I have a number of friends and colleagues that work for majority white institution or historically white companies that they now sit as the head. You know, nothing would please us to be able to find some solution to look back in history and say, here is the magic reward. Everything now is made right. But I don't think that even trying to compensate those families would erase what has taken place in the past.
If there were an opportunity for reparations to occur, I would like to see the companies that benefited from blacks being slaves being held responsible for making some kind of atonement or reparation However, I would like to see it not in terms of an individual contribution to a family or a person. I would like to see it as a reinforcement of some of our institutions, like our historically black colleges and universities.
I sometimes do feel that companies who have profited off the backs of slaves and other blacks who were unpaid, I do believe that we're owed something. And I think it's because when I walk around some of the, the old buildings here in DC and see some of these old structures, I know for a fact that some of these, if not all of these, were built at the hands of slaves who were not paid, who endured hardships, pains, suffering. And now it's a matter of we suffer in different ways now. So by not having the restitution involved with the pain and suffering, it still brings us back to that sentiment, and it sometimes opens old wounds when we are refused at least the acknowledgement.
Yes, the Japanese Americans, they were given restitution for their imprisonment. Why shouldn't the African American descendants of slaves be given restitution? So many people have benefited from the works of the slaves. Corporations, companies, families, private wealthy families, they have benefited from slave labor. So why shouldn't we be, given that something back for the free labor that was given?
I would say yes, because they profited from persons who at that time didn't have a voice, but now they have dependents that are aware that it was their ancestors who were used, and I won't say used. Their ancestors contributed to the success of the companies, and the companies, in a sense, were able to profit and make money off of individuals. So yes, I would venture to say that yes, they should reimburse or provide contributions back to their families.
I never wish that I was born later. I am happy in the time that I'm perfectly satisfied with when I was born. I have seen a lot of stuff change for the good in my lifetime, and I hope to see some more changes come for African Americans as I continue to live this life, but I'm perfectly happy with the time in which I was born.
At one time, I wish I had been born earlier, but when I look at what I would have missed, I'm glad that I was born during that time. For instance, back during the time we were born, men knew how to treat ladies. We had gentlemen and we had ladies, and I liked that. As far as for the future, I like all the technology and things that are going on. But I remember, I'll use my son for instance. He's 35 right now. And I was trying to make sure that he would be a gentleman and he would treat ladies right. And I would say, if you see, back in my day, a man would open the door for a lady. Well, they don't do that now. If they see you struggling with a package, they would ask, may I help you? They don't do that now. But I was trying to make my son do that, and he said, Ma, when I try to do that, those girls cuss me out, and they'll say, I can do it myself, or what you trying to do, and I didn't realize it was going on like that. So I enjoyed the time when I was growing up.
I feel like the way society is now, I think a lot of people are comfortable and kind of forgot the things that people have accomplished within the 1950s and 60s. So I actually don't think I would want to be born later. I would like to be born at an earlier time so that I can really be involved in the civil rights movement and to really be involved with speaking up for the injustices that were against African Americans and minorities in general. But I think that now, of course, I can't go back in the past, but I think I can still just make a dent in society, and with my generation, we can do better moving forward to continue the cause.
No. I was born in 1943, and that's fine with me. I feel that I have I wasn't the greatest generation in the sense of fighting in World War II, but I was born during the middle of World War II. And the experiences that I've had growing up in a segregated Washington, D.C. as a child. Washington was forcibly opened in '53 by the courts. But going right out here in Maryland, right out here in Virginia, and seeing all the white-only signs, colored entrance in the rear signs, going north 100 miles in Delaware and still seeing those signs, and living and reading, but not a physical part of the civil rights movement. I think this is the greatest time to be alive as far as I'm concerned. And then seeing the changes that have come about as a result of the laws that have been passed and the enforceability of those laws and the efforts done by Dr. King and the courts and many outstanding people who got to be the first black this, the first black that, to see those. And my regret, and it's a deep regret, is that my father died before all of this was totally realized, because we're still realizing it. But he realized most of what we have.
Well, to be honest, I actually appreciate where I am now. I don't feel like I would have had a better advantage being born back then. I feel blessed to not have to have gone through some of the sacrifices, some of the heartaches, and again, the suffrage and the pain and discrimination that was obvious back then. Some things are more inobvious now until you get into the cut of everything. But I'm blessed to know that the suffrage back then paid off, that I have advantages now that I don't think I would have had if it had happened back then. So I feel blessed to be in a time where I can enjoy the fruits of that labor, but still, push hard and make my own way, so that way my children can have hopefully less suffrage as well too.
You know, I am so lucky to have been born when I was born. I'm 32 years old, so I'm still young enough to see all the changes and to remember when Barack Obama became president, or to been through the era of Oprah and of all these amazing African American people. I'm very lucky to be born at that time. If I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't be born earlier or later, just because I feel like I'm young enough right now to understand the struggle, but benefit from the progress.
I think I was born just at the right time. When I was born, things were just changing from integration and separate water fountains, and I am just proud to be where I am as far as being able to see the changes, to see that I can do anything I want to do, and that the kids younger than me can do anything they want to do. And I think I came right at the right time.
I feel like I was born at the time I was supposed to be born. I experienced what I've experienced, and I'm thankful for the experiences that I've had. As we move forward, current day and moving forward, I think, again, it's a timing. It's all about timing. And what I've experienced has been amazing. I mean, I've seen the first African American president. That's probably the biggest thrill. That had I been born later, I don't think I would have the same gratitude and the same sense of excitement about that moment, because it would be I would read it in a history book, but being present in the moment, I was there, I was watching it on television when it all happened. So I feel like being born in the moment is perfect versus pushing back to later.
I don't think, I'm glad I was born at the time I was born in. I was born in an era, I was born in the middle of everything. And so I say I was born in the middle of where it was still prejudice-y and rioting. I was born in an era where crack erupted the United States. And I think if I wasn't born in that era, I don't think I would have the fire in me that I have now.
It's funny when I talk to my friends. It's one of the things that we love to play when we're in the car, we're driving somewhere, and we're listening to different songs or different music that really transcends age. We can turn on something from Nancy Wilson in her early days, or we're listening to something that is very current, maybe like a Beyonce or someone that's on the radio now. And we all start to wonder, well, I wonder what it was like to live in that particular time. They may think of the grace and the elegance that was happening in the 50s and the 60s, which was only just one portion of the things that was going on. But when we say, well, I wished I lived there or I wish I was a part of that time, be very careful and mindful what you're saying. What was publicized on a record cover or what was shown on a television clip, there was more going on in America than just the fancy or the dressed up version. When I look at, would I pick another era or another time where I could have ordained me coming on the scene, either in the past, present tense, or future, I would still have to say that I'm thankful that my time is now.
You know, I've thought about being born earlier or being born later, and I have to say that I'm really very pleased to have been born in 1945 and to have come up in the 50s and 60s and to see the progress that we've made. I would not like, I don't believe, to have been born a little later. I think things are a little bit more difficult now. I think it's harder to make a living now. I think it's just a different set of circumstances now. I'm really happy.
When I undress what has happened in America's history and I look at the slave movement and things that was going on there, I really do not feel or think that I would have made it based upon my mouth and my quick temper. When I look at what is to come for our children and our children's children, I am happy and I am pleased that this was the appointed time for me to come on the scene to try to make things a little bit better for them.
I believe that I was born at the right time where I am right now, and in order to fulfill the things I'm supposed to do as it relates to educating our people.
Exactly where I was when I heard the verdict, and exactly where I was when I first heard about his death. And personally, I think that of course it's awful, but I think that it's just one example of this violence problem that we have, this problem where we can't get equal rights in some places. And I think that we need to hear more examples of it, because with Trayvon Martin, it kind of was a fad, you know? It was kind of, this week everyone is really upset about this issue, and the next week we go back to whatever we were doing, however we were handling our lives. And I don't mean to say that we should dwell on one issue forever, but the same people that were, really deeply rooted, trying to say that they felt so awfully about this problem, we didn't do anything about it. And I think that if we heard more and more about these cases where Black people are not treated as equals, we would take stronger actions to try and fix that.
Trayvon Martin's trial had no effect on me at all. It wasn't that I didn't care. I watched it, I followed it, but it just didn't have no effect on me.
I feel in my heart that that was a miscarriage of justice. I really do. I think that the idea that he was in his neighborhood, he was going to his house, and he wasn't armed with anything more than maybe a bag of potato chips or Fritos, should have set a tone. This business about stand your ground is one of the most racist laws and approaches to law that I can think of. It deeply affects me because we are all potential Trayvons. And I think that we've got to come to grips, and those types of laws have no place in our society.
Injustice. Being a retired DC police officer and seeing a lot of these things, I was not surprised at the outcome of that trial.
Sad disappointment to know that in the year 2013, that it's still okay, seemingly okay, to just kill our young Black kids and no justice is served. I'm still very angry at Florida I'm one of those people until the Stand Your Ground law is revised or revisited, I probably will stay away from certain places that have those uncontrolled rules.
When sitting in my living room following the trial for Trayvon Martin, it really was an eye-opener, and it really was a moment where you had to stop, stand still, and realize we have accomplished a lot, we've come oh so far, but we still have a long way to go. Here we are still in 2013, and you're still judged by appearance. A young man that caused a threat because he was different from those in that particular area. It really made me stop and take a look and to realize we still have much work to do.
The result of the trial, I think, is what we could focus on, or what the focus would be.
It just showed me still how much racism and injustice there still is in this country, that regardless of what our station is in life, how rich or how poor or whatever we are still viewed as suspects.
It was just sad to me. It broke my heart that this young African-American man is going to get Skittles and iced tea and is walking back home with a hoodie on and is basically profiled and targeted, and then he gets away with it. What does that say that you can, that just broke my heart.
It takes us back to the thought that justice is supposed to be fair. However, we all know the society that we live in, that justice is not fair. A lot of times most of the time it appears and seems that it's based on the color of the skin.
People are murdered all the time, and black people have been murdered for racist reasons. I think the hardest part of that trial with Trayvon Martin was not seeing justice prevail. That was hard to see. I wasn't surprised at all by him being murdered, because people do horrible things like that all the time. I was very surprised and disappointed in our justice system, and it made me kind of lose a little bit of faith, because it was like, here was someone who admitted to being in the wrong, and that is wrong, but still they let it go. And for me, that was not just about a black-white thing, that was just about a justice thing.
We're still being viewed as suspicious, as not belonging in certain areas, and it's just so blatant. That trial itself was a mockery of the justice system.
The effect that it had on me was that the system that we have in place, the justice system we have in place, still is not where it needs to be, and who knows when it will ever get to that point.
I saw the verdict. It really made me sad, because the evidence was there, and regardless of people's arguments, that the prosecution wasn't very strong, the evidence was there. And it just made me realize that, because in a sense, I think people were comfortable. Race relations, people, always referred to, we have African-American president. So we weren't really thinking more so about like discrimination. We weren't really thinking about like unjust, but it made me sad, but it also was an eye-opener. And then once Trayvon Martin, the verdict came out, you started to hear more about stories of, African-American teens in particular, facing injustice in the criminal system, and, with the New York laws of, frisking. So it made me sad, but then I was glad to see that it was a wake-up call for a lot of people, and just for us to call out the justice system and to call out society for this prejudice.
The Trayvon murder trial, I think, is the latest in a series of travesties that have happened to us in the United States. And I won't say the black community, because it affected the white community, Hispanic community, Native American community as well, because it's just all too telling and all too real, the fact that can happen to anybody.
It just makes me sad, because this could happen to anybody, you know, any son, any male. And it's sad to be this day and age and still have to go through something, because the similarity was to Emmett Till back in the late 50s, and I remember that very well.
It made me realize that racism still exists, but not only that, is that some things that should be based on legal ethic, based on an area, is still racially charged. I understood that in the context of the verdict, the jury had to make their choices based on the legal standing in Florida. So I was basing my decision based on just a moral standing. So sometimes we do take a charge of making everything racial when we don't take the time to understand that if we looked at everything on its merit, sometimes it really is about the merit of what something is being judged on. So the trial itself really exposed me to the fact that racism still exists because of all the propaganda that was outside of the trial and even after the trial and before the trial to show how people really felt about the whole entire circumstance.